Hello and welcome to the SR 520 Montlake Project's May online monthly meeting. My name is Alexis Lorenz with the Graham Communications team, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. Also in the virtual room, we have our presenter, John Welch, Graham's SR 520 Director of Construction, Bob Derry, Graham's SR 520 Public Information Manager, and Dave Becker, SR 520 Programs Director of Construction with the Washington State Department of Transportation. Before I pass you off to John Welch for our presentation, I'd like to walk through a few housekeeping items. In an effort to reduce background noise and improve everyone's experience, all attendees will be muted today. You can adjust the volume by clicking on the audio settings. I see we have a lot of people calling in, and I'd like to get to know who is joining us today. On your screen, you should see a poll pop up for you to take now. It asks just a few questions about where you're calling in from and whether you've joined us before. I'll give you a quick moment to fill out the poll. During the presentation, you are encouraged to engage with us. We invite you to submit your questions as they come to you. This is helpful so you don't forget them along the way. You can send them through the Q&A box on your screen. When you submit a question, we request that you send short, complete sentences. This helps us when reading out the questions during the Q&A portion of our event. I see a lot of you are taking our poll. We have a lot of different people in the room with us today. Looks like our top contender is the Montlake area, with other Seattle neighborhoods coming in a close second for representation. And it also looks like a lot of you have attended our monthly meetings before, so that's really exciting. Thank you for joining us. Again, for those of you still joining us today, my name is Alexis Lorenz with the Graham Communications team, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. In keeping with Governor Inslee's stay home, stay healthy order, this online meeting is being held from socially safe distances. As you may know, the Washington State Department of Transportation suspended work in late March on nearly all of its construction projects statewide, including the SR 520 Montlake Project. With the progress made since March to slow the spread of the coronavirus in Washington, the governor on April 25th authorized the restart of low-risk construction projects that adhere to 30 safety protocols. This includes keeping workers at least 6 feet apart on job sites. You can learn more about the plans for resuming construction of the state's transportation projects on the Washington State Department of Transportation website. Now I'll pass you over to John for our SR 520 Montlake Project presentation.
Thank you, Alexis. First steps, we'll just walk through the agenda and what to expect from this presentation. We're going to go through a project summary to discuss the current status of where the project's at, what's to come, so what's ahead of us here in the coming months and what everyone can expect in the area. And then we'll hand it back to Alexis on how to stay informed, and then we will review any questions submitted during the presentation, and we will work through answering those questions here on this meeting. So project summary, many of you are repeat return parties to this meeting. So the big three components that we have is a new eastbound marine bridge that goes from the shore out to the floating bridge. Along with that, we have the Montlake Lid Bridge, which is about 750 feet long and about 250 feet wide. And really what it's going to do, and you can see on the image on the right-hand side, is create a small park setting that'll really tie the Lake Washington Boulevard side along to the Shelby Hamlin neighborhood and really reconnect this neighborhood that's been divided by 520 since the early 60s. And the last piece is a pretty exciting piece that's also in the right image. To the far right is a pedestrian land bridge, which will tie into the regional shared use path that goes across 520 and then also has a connection to the Bill Dawson Trail. And so that is dedicated to cyclists and pedestrians, and it'll be create a real nice environment that'll allow pedestrian and bicyclists to get across 520 while still being almost in a park-like setting. As far as the project schedule, the red line is approximately where we're at right now here in May of 2020. And so we are about 2/3 of the way through our design and starting to wrap up a lot of the final design elements that we'll be building over the next 3 years. And we're also in the midst of the removal of the existing West Approach Bridge, which is the old 520 approach that went out to the old floating bridge, as well as starting the trestle construction that'll be used to build the new marine structure out on the water. Additionally, many of you may have noticed that there's a fair amount of work that's happened already in the median. and that is what we call our Pier 2 of the lid structure, and that portion of the project will be the center section of the lid, which we are actually at this point, we're about 2 to 3 weeks away from finishing once we restart, and then we'll be doing another major traffic switch in order to start the north and south piers, which we call Piers 1 and 3. The overall project is scheduled to be completed in February of 2023. Obviously, with our latest work suspension, there are going to be some schedule impacts, but we are working with WashDOT to try and minimize those impacts and keep the project on schedule the best we can. So the images we see up here are for the construction cameras that we have on the site, and a link for these can be found at the project webpage. So these photos are taken every 10 minutes and are kept in real time, and in fact, you can go back and review past pictures as well, and even run time-lapse photo sessions of each of the camera angles that are represented here. So the construction look ahead and what to expect coming up. As Alexis has mentioned, the governor has issued a phase 1 construction restart program. We do expect here in the next week or so that we will be working on getting some of the low-risk items as far as social distancing back up and running. And as part of that, what we can expect to see is some work starting again at the north pit, which is located, we see on the left-hand side of that image, there's 2 red dots connected by a dashed line. The one on the north side is the north pit, so we're going to have some work that's going to restart there, as well as demolition of the Montlake Market. And then the phase 2 portion, which is anticipated to be restarted around the first week of June, we will see daytime pile driving on the trestle continue in Lake Washington, the saw cutting and removal of the old existing bridge. Montlake lid construction, as I mentioned, has got 2 to 3 weeks for it to conclude, to wrap up the final pours of the pier walls. And then we'll move into lane closures and reductions on SR 520 and Montlake Boulevard, which we'll detail a little bit here a little bit further. So upcoming work that we have shortly after we restart the project is some tree removals along Montlake Boulevard. These are necessary for the final configuration as well as some of the temporary configurations that we're going to be going into. So the tree removals will be removed in the median as well as on the east side of Montlake Boulevard. So what you can expect is the inside lane of northbound Montlake Boulevard will be closed. From Roanoke Street to East Hamlin, left turns will be allowed. The inside lane of southbound Montlake Boulevard will be closed between East Hamlin and the westbound SR 520 on-ramp. And this work will all be conducted during the daytime hours, so you can expect to hear noise from tree and stump removal during these activities. So again, this is all daytime activity, and this work is necessary primarily to construct the east half of the regional shared use path tunnel, and then we'll shift traffic back over the top of the tunnel during a future phase to complete the west half. Followed by that will be a full closure of Montlake Boulevard. This will happen from 10 p.m. on a Friday night to 6 a.m. on a Monday. This work is necessary for the relocation of a 12-inch water line. We'll also be completing the balance of the tree removal that needs to be concluded in this area. All lanes of northbound Montlake Boulevard will be closed between all lanes of southbound Montlake Boulevard will be closed between East Lake Washington Boulevard and East Hamlin, as well as westbound off-ramp to Montlake Boulevard. This work will be around the clock, so there is a fair amount of work that needs to happen over this closure to get this water line out of Montlake Boulevard and into an area in the construction zone. So we will be doing this work underneath the major project noise construction variance. There will be guidelines and maximum limits to what our noise generating activities can be. And lastly, we'll have a major closure for SR 520. This is going to happen likely here towards the end of July. And what you can expect is a full closure from 10 p.m. Friday night through 6 a.m. Monday morning. Both directions of 520 will be closed from I-5 all the way to 92nd and Bellevue. What this work will be doing is doing final tie-ins for the major traffic switch that I mentioned earlier, and that's necessary to move traffic right now, which is really pushed as far as westbound direction is pushed as far north as it can go. Eastbound is pushed as far south, and what we're going to do is move both of those lanes in towards the center of 520 to free up construction areas for Piers 1 and 3 of the lid structure. So what to expect? Moving forward, for those familiar with what's been going on, there's really going to be not a very large difference. There is going to be some pavement demolition that will have to happen. I do not believe it'll be any more significant than what's already been experienced, but there will be noise and vibration associated with some nighttime operations. They will fall underneath our MPP CNV, which is our major project construction noise variance. And so we do expect there to be hotel accommodations will be offered, and we will coordinate that with local residents and frontline residents to make sure that any inconveniences are addressed, and that we're doing our best to be a good neighbor to make sure that we can minimize impacts to the local residents, and while still pursuing the difficult task of getting major construction projects in an urban area completed. So during that major closure, work will happen 24 hours a day. And I think a lot of folks here on this call have already experienced a couple of these closures. They've usually gone fairly well, but we're here to make sure that we don't burden any of the residents here any more than necessary, and to help support whatever measures need to take place in order to make sure that the inconvenience is minimized.
Awesome. Thank you for that, John. Everyone, we're almost to the Q&A portion of our event, so I wanted to take a moment to remind you to send your questions our way. Sometimes the Q&A box will hide on us, so you can tap your screen or move your mouse and it will appear again. When submitting your questions, please send them individually and try and keep them a sentence or two in length. Questions that are too long or are specific to an individual can be difficult for us to answer in the moment, and we'll need to follow up with you offline. So how to stay informed? Throughout the SR 520 Montlake Project, there are a number of ways for you to engage with us. One of the quickest, most direct ways to have a question or concern addressed is through our 24-hour construction hotline. That number is on your screen. We also manage an email account that is checked weekdays, where you can submit any of your non-urgent questions or concerns. Subscribing to our email lists or following us on Twitter will ensure you stay informed on any upcoming events or notable construction activities. And my personal favorite, Construction Corner. Construction Corner is updated frequently and has a map showing notable traffic impacts in the Montlake area. You can also find information on how we are managing construction effects like noise or vibration. And the absolute best way to stay informed is by participating. As a reminder, our in-person events are currently suspended, but stay tuned for our upcoming online open house and our June online monthly meeting. More information will be shared through our email updates as the events approach. Now I'll pass you off to Bob Derry, SR 520 Public Information Manager, for the eagerly awaited Q&A. Bob will read out your questions, which will be answered by either John Welch, Graham's SR 520 Director of Construction and our presenter today, or Dave Becker, SR 520 Programs Director of Construction with the Washington State Department of Transportation. Bob?
Thanks, Alexis. Our first question here from somebody in the Montlake area is asking, I think this is for you, John, when Montlake Boulevard is closed for the 12-inch water line move, will there be traffic mitigation officers used to handle additional traffic coming through the East Lake Washington Boulevard exit?
Yes, we are going to take a look at that. I think obviously at nighttime when the volumes are down lower, that may not be necessary. One thing we have noticed here recently, and we expect to continue for some time, is the fact that traffic volumes as a whole are markedly down. So this is a situation that we can be pretty flexible in response, that if we feel that or if we notice or see that there is excess volume that is causing any problems or backups, that we can definitely get uniformed officers out there to manage the traffic flows.
Okay, excellent. Here's one from somebody named Greg asking, what precisely are the defined, quote, stricter rules of nighttime noise levels?
So the actual rules are located, I believe, on the construction corner of the project site as far as the allowance of the variances. And the only reason I say that is because they are variable. But in general, depending upon location, work has to be kept, any work measured at 50 feet needs to be kept under anywhere from 63 decibels up to about 68 decibels, depending upon the work type. And so there are quite a few parameters, but in general, The conversation that we're having in this room right now would exceed those noise thresholds. It's kind of strange that when you start thinking about it in terms of that, how construction would have to be kept at a volume lower than what a normal conversation level would be.
And I'd just add as well that we do have noise monitors out there monitoring the noise electronically, and we have an independent noise monitor out there as well taking readings. So as John indicated, there are pretty strict requirements. Kind of depends a little bit where you're located within the job, but if you want more information, there is information on the website, and if that doesn't provide the answer that you need, we could certainly provide more if you want to reach out to us.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up to that, we get alerts in real time from the noise monitors, as well as if we do get complaints, and in both cases, all of the alerts, as far as alarms, as well as any calls that we receive, they're in real time investigated to make sure that the noises are mitigated. So there is a lot of effort that goes into make sure that the construction complies with that.
Excellent. Now here's a tree question. The question is, can you please provide more details about exactly where the tree removal on Montlake Boulevard will be happening?
So there's about 4 to 5 trees that are on the east side of Montlake Boulevard that are located between the westbound Montlake off-ramp and Hamlin Street. And then there are 9 total trees that are located in the median that go from Hamlin down to the bridge over 520. And so those are the trees that are necessary to be removed for the construction. Those trees are part of the mitigation efforts so that trees either in multiple quantities or probably not like size, but multiple quantities will be added back to the project when we do the final landscaping. A lot of the trees that we are going to be putting back are much more mature than what you normally see in a washed-out project, so they're going to be trees that you would expect to see after 3 or 4 years of growth from the project, so they are fairly substantial.
Okay, here's one who's saying they came a little bit late to the presentation, and they're asking, did you mention when construction will start again?
We did mention, we do expect some operations to start ramping back up next week under the low-risk restart, but as far as the major elements of the work, we do not expect them to start up till the first week of June.
So somebody's saying that some families in the North Street Alley area have received some flat tires in the last couple of months. I know who this person is, and we can answer offline, but do you have anything to say about flat tires from screws?
We currently don't have anything to say. We haven't had any operations going out in the area for over 6 weeks now. This is the first I've seen of it, but we should definitely follow up and see if there is any issue. I think this question is going to show up a couple times, but we would definitely like to get a little bit more information as to what's going on there, because our operations wouldn't have had anything in the area for the last 6 weeks.
But I'll follow up online with this person too. So here's one from somebody named John. It says, do we know when the cell tower contractor will finish work, clean up the site, and install the trees and shrubs to beautify the site?
So I don't have the exact information on that, but we can check with the cell tower contractor and get back to you. I think we probably have your contact information. I know that they were under the same stop work as the Graham team in terms of the shelter in place and stay healthy, stay safe requirements from the governor. So we'll double check with them. They are free to begin low risk work as well. So we'll check and get back to you on that.
And I'll just jump in and say we are almost out of time for questions. So we have time for a few more. So feel free to send those over as we get close to wrapping up.
Okay, we got a few more here. So here's a question. Considering traffic has dropped to record low levels during this pandemic, can any of the nighttime work be done during the day this summer instead, with some sort of variance to the noise permit?
So we are looking, you're right, the traffic, as John indicated, has dropped rather precipitously during the daytime, and we are in coordination with our regional traffic folks to see what we can do during the daytime in terms of whether they're lane closures or ramp closures that we can take on 520. Some of the work that John mentioned on the North Pit involves work along that westbound off-ramp to Montlake, and I think we're going to do a lot of that work during the daytime. We've got permission to do that. So we're definitely looking at taking advantage of the lower volumes to do some of the work that normally would have to occur at night during the daytime.
Here's one regarding the 520 closure saying, is the SR 520 trail included in the weekend closure?
We make a very big effort whenever possible to leave that trail open. It's only under circumstances where we actually have to modify the trail that will close it. At this time, we do not have plans to close the 520 trail, but depending upon the work that needs to happen to move traffic around, there is a possibility, but we prefer to do everything we can to keep that trail open because it's very heavily used.
Another tree question. You mentioned trees on the east side of Montlake Place East in the presentation. Will those be removed during this time as well?
Yes, there's going to be a focused effort to remove trees during the first closure, which will just be daytime closures over the weekend. And when we do the full closure on Montlake Boulevard a week or two after, that's when the median trees will be coming out.
So early in the presentation, you mentioned a pedestrian tunnel. And the question is that a pedestrian tunnel under Montlake Boulevard at the Bill Dawson Trail?
Yes, the pedestrian tunnel will be a continuation of the Bill Dawson Trail that'll tie it into the regional shared use path and the trail that goes across 520. So that'll be built in two different phases. The east half will be built first, then the west half. And then at a completion, that tunnel will be about 23 feet wide, and it'll go underneath Montlake Boulevard.
And we have a question here that looks like a follow-up question to the one you answered previously about the difference between nighttime noise limits and daytime noise limits. The question is, regarding the nighttime noise limits, are those the same limits during the night as there are during the day?
No, the limits are much more stringent at nighttime. Daytime, there essentially is no limitation on the noise that can be generated. I'll give you an example. When we're doing pile driving for the trestle and we're pounding the 24-inch steel piling out on the lake, we can only do that during the day. Activities like that are specifically excluded from being performed at night.
Okay. Well, we've run out of questions here, and we're also running out of time. So I'm going to send it back over to Alexis here to close things up.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you everyone who called in and participated in our online monthly meeting today. Tomorrow you will be receiving a follow-up email with our 24-hour hotline number and our email address in case you were unable to note them throughout the presentation. We appreciate you all joining us this afternoon, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.